It is Thursday. It's the 31st of July. You're watching ARIRANG Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gon-young. Now, we're going to begin with the results from the largest by-election in Korean history, where 15 seats for the National Assembly were up for grabs. It was an overwhelming victory for the ruling party, winning 11 seats and regaining its majority in the National Assembly. Our Kim Min-ji has a wrap-up of the results.
The ruling Saenuri Party took home 11 out of the 15 parliamentary seats up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections, regaining majority at the National Assembly. In the hotly contested race of Seoul's Dongjak-bi district, the ruling party's former Seoul mayor candidate Na Kyung-won secured a ticket to parliament after defeating her unified opposition rival Do Hae-chan. In the Suwon-C district of Jeollanam-do Province, opposition candidate and political big name Son Nak-gyu bowed out to conservative rookie Kim Myung-nam. In the Suwon-D district, the opposition's Park Kwang-won, a former journalist, came out the winner against his ruling party rival and chief of staff to former President Lee Myung-bak, Im Tae-hee. The ruling party swept the other 3 capital area districts, including Gimpo, where the ruling party's Hong Choro tasted victory against liberal political veteran Kim Do-kwan. Securing all of the 2 seats in its traditional stronghold of southeastern Gyeongsang region, the ruling party also took all 3 seats from the central Chungcheon area. As for the opposition, it won 3 seats from the political base of southwestern Jeolla region. But the 4th seat in the Suncheon-Goksun district was claimed by President Bak's close aide Lee Jung-hyun, the first time ever by a ruling party candidate. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Well, Wednesday's by-election was a completely different story for the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy. They were dealt a heavy blow, losing in 5 of the 6 capital area districts, as well as a seat in its traditional stronghold of Jeollanam-do Province. And to take responsibility, the party's leadership, including its 2 co-leaders, resigned on this Thursday. Here's our Choi You-sun with this report.
Apologizing for their party's crushing defeat in Wednesday's by-elections, the co-leaders of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have stepped aside after just 4 months at the helm.
I take all the responsibility and will resign as party co-leader. I will work to make sure our party carries out major reforms to regain the public's trust.
Former independent presidential candidate Ahn Cheol-soo, who had ascended to party leadership after merging with the main opposition Democratic Party in March, said he too would do his best for the good of the party as an ordinary member. All other members of the party's Supreme Council followed their co-leaders out the door, claiming responsibility for the election loss. The leaders had been heavily criticized for causing friction during the nomination process and thereby lowering the party's chances of a good showing in the poll. The latest by-elections were considered a litmus test of the Park Geun-hye administration. Its mishandling of April's ferry disaster and the failure to catch the suspected ferry owner Yoo Byung-an alive were focal points of the campaign period. Floor leader Park Young-sun now assumes temporary leadership of the party. She, along with an emergency committee, will seek ways to help the party rise from the ashes and elect a new leader. Different factions within the party are expected to elbow for position in the process. The one who's likely to be most affected, however, is Ahn Cheol-soo. Once considered a political sensation and a presidential hopeful, Ahn missed out on a valuable chance Wednesday to prove his reform-minded leadership in the party. Choi You-sun, ARIRANG News.
So voters have given the Conservatives the opportunity to overhaul their party and focus on more urgent issues rather than being wrangled in political disputes. The party leadership's top priorities now? Well, boosting the economy and hitting the accelerator on the president's reform drive. Ji Myung-gil reports.
President Park Geun-hye has been given the green light to get busy running state affairs for the rest of her term. The ruling Saenuri Party's unexpected landslide victory in Wednesday's by-election has given the government a mandate to rebuild itself in the wake of April's ferry disaster and pursue its stated goal of economic revival.
The people voted for the Saenuri Party because the public felt the urgency to reform the country and revive the economy.
The governing party promised to support President Park in carrying out her national reform drives and not to use politics to divide the people.
The Saenuri Party will denounce any form of regionalism that is deeply rooted in Korean politics and will work toward bringing about national unity.
The ruling party's new chairman, Kim Moo-sung, is expected to use the election win as a mandate to carry out a complete overhaul of the party. With no elections scheduled until 2016, Kim has ample time to make his mark. It is also possible that he may equalize the nature of the relationship between the party and the presidential house of Cheongwade. The ruling Saenuri Party now has 158 seats in the 300-seat National Assembly. The main opposition party has 130. Kim Young-gil, ARIRANG News.
Now, in other news, North Korea has on 16 different occasions this year conducted missile tests, drawing international condemnation each time they do. And with the provocations becoming more frequent, the U.S. says it's ready to tighten the screw on the regime, but it's asking the rest of the world to follow suit. Here's our UDN with this report.
Washington's point man on North Korea, Glenn Davies, says the United States won't sit back and simply wait on Pyongyang to denuclearize.
We're going to continue to do everything we can, not to sit down and have a coffee clatch with them and try to convince them of the logic of it, but to use pressure, in particular, to point out to them that there's only one way forward. It's the peaceful diplomatic path forward.
The comments came in a hearing held by the House Subcommittee on Asia and the Pacific, where Davies and the U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights, Robert King, were questioned for over an hour on the Obama administration's approach to Pyongyang's combative policies. King defended the administration's stance.
We're looking at sanctions. One of the issues that we need to do is try to do whatever we do in concert with other countries. Sanctions by the United States alone are very limited effectiveness.
In the latest round of unilateral measures against the North Korean regime, the United States Treasury Department imposed sanctions on 2 North Korean shipping companies that operated a ship that was seized by Panama last year for trying to transport military equipment in violation of UN resolutions. The renewed emphasis on U.S. policy towards Pyongyang comes on the heels of a series of missile launches by the reclusive state, 16 this year alone. North Korea fired 4 more short-range missiles into the East Sea on Wednesday afternoon. In response, the U.S. Department of Defense said North Korea should stop polluting waters around the country with missiles and focus instead on feeding its own people. 유리안, 아리랑 뉴스.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young, every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Well, government measures to revitalize the housing market go into effect on Friday, that is tomorrow. They're intended to lessen the burden on potential homebuyers and make it easier for them to stay out of debt. But as our Kim Ji-yeon reports, it could end up having the opposite effect for the older generation.
Some government regulations on the housing market are being eased starting Friday, and the Korean economy is expected to start feeling the effects in the latter half of this year. The changes include easing measures that limit the amount that people can borrow from banks when buying a house, depending on various economic variables, including income. The loan-to-value and debt-to-income, or LTV and DTI ratios, are being raised to 70% and 60% respectively. This means home buyers would be able to borrow up to $340,000, up nearly $100,000 from the current total when buying a house worth $488,000. They'll also feel less pressure to turn to non-banking institutions that charge them higher interest rates. The policy has already started to bring some vitality into the housing market. The number of housing transactions in Seoul shot up in July, which is traditionally an off month for home buying. The Financial Supervisory Service says the amount of housing mortgage loans increased by 80% in June from the previous month to $475 million, the highest amount in 12 months. But the moves are also being met with concern. It's feared the deregulatory moves may lead people in their 50s or older into more debt. Last month, the amount of housing mortgage loans for people in those older age groups increased an average of 20% from 2 years earlier. This according to data from Korea's 4 major commercial banks. They were apparently trying to pay back debt accrued from self-employed businesses and from losses incurred after failing to sell houses amid falling prices. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Well, the Korean government will invest more in research and development next year. Seoul's Science Ministry says that the R&D budget will be about $12.1 billion next year. That it's up more than 2% from this year's allocation. The focus of that money will be on 3 major sectors: space technology, disaster prevention research, and future growth engines. And for the first time ever, $1 billion of the budget will be earmarked for individual researchers for developing new technologies. And Korea's Samsung Electronics has posted some very disappointing second quarter figures on the back of weakening smartphone sales. The company says operating profit in the April to June period was down 24.5% from a year earlier at just under 7.2 trillion won. That's a touch over $7 billion. Well, Samsung's second quarter sales also slumped at nearly 9% from the same period last year. Analysts say Samsung, the world's largest smartphone maker, is facing a slowdown in its mobile business, and its margins are being hampered by the strong Korean won. Well, on the other side of the spectrum, Korea's biggest web search engine had a banner second quarter. Naver recorded significant rises in its operating profits on strong overseas sales, driven by its messenger application service, Line. As our Hwang Ji-hye reports, that's good news for Naver and its global aspirations.
It seems Naver, Korea's #1 portal operator, has solidified a corner on its market. The company's second quarter profit rose 39% from a year earlier to 191.2 billion won, or roughly $186 million. The rise runs counter to the 30% drop in operating profit recorded by local competitor Daum Communications in the second quarter, and operating losses from the nation's third largest web portal player, SK Communications. With a firm hold on the domestic market, Naver is now looking overseas with its messenger application service, Line. Overseas sales driven by Line took up more than 30% of Naver's overall sales for the first time in the April to June period this year. Around 80% of Line's revenue is generated from Japan. Thailand and Indonesia are also big markets in terms of user numbers, while Line has also made inroads in Mexico and the United States. Sales from Line in the second quarter rose 56% from the previous year to $178 million. Naver also said earlier this month that Line had applied for an initial public offering in Tokyo. With the second quarter performance numbers exceeding market expectations, analysts say it's now more likely that Line's IPO in the Japanese market goes smoothly. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Well, Latin America's third largest economy is headed down the path toward default for the second time in 13 years. This after talks between Argentina and its holdout creditors ended without a deal. Argentina in the red, our Na Hyun-kyung reports.
His face lined with tension. Argentine Economy Minister Axel Kicillof walks into a press conference in New York after failing to reach agreement on averting his country's second default in nearly 13 years.
This offer is legal for Argentina and doesn't violate our contract's clauses, but was not accepted by the vulture funds. This offer wasn't accepted because evidently they want more, and they want it now.
Global ratings agency Standard & Poor's has downgraded Argentina's foreign currency rating to selective default. Analysts say a default of Latin America's third largest economy is unlikely to have a huge impact on the global economy, but will likely weaken the Argentina peso as more people hold on to dollars. The imminent default stems from a years-long legal battle with two of Argentina's bondholders who had rejected restructured debt agreements in 2002 when the country first defaulted. The Buenos Aires government at present cannot pay other creditors because of a U.S. court ruling last month, which said no creditor can be paid unless the two so-called holdout creditors are paid as well. Kicillof says the country will take all the necessary measures to confront what he referred to as an unfair situation. 나현경, 아리랑 뉴스.
Now, China wants to conclude bilateral free trade talks with Korea on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit set for November this year. This is according to Korea's Vice Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol following his meetings with senior Chinese officials in Beijing this week. Seoul's senior diplomat said that in response, he asked the Chinese side to put more political will into meeting that schedule. However, Cho pointed out that the talks have been proceeding at a snail's pace as both sides remain far apart on tariff removal for agricultural and industrial goods. Now, during the latest round of negotiations, the two countries agreed in principle on market liberalization. Well, speaking of FTAs, 3 years ago this Friday, a bilateral free trade pact between Korea and Peru went into effect. And despite intense competition in the South American country from bigger economies like the U.S. and China, Korea appears to be faring pretty well. Well, the market share of Korean products in Peru has jumped 3 notches to 7th since before the FTA went into effect, and that's according to the Korea International Trade Association. Korean exports to Peru have increased by an average of about 15% each year, led by chemical products, which grabbed a 7% stake in the Peruvian market last year, which is up 2.5 percentage points from 2010. Now, so Korean voters in 15 districts chose lawmakers in yesterday's by-elections. Leading up to voting day, all eyes are on whether President Park's ruling party could retain its parliamentary majority. And it turns out that the party won more than enough seats to do that. This, of course, will help President Park push through her economic stimulus policy and regulatory reform measures. Let's discuss the economic implications of the election results. Our contributor, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, joins me live in the studio. So, Dr. Kim, a major win for the ruling party, and some are saying that it might have been the ruling party's strategy on focusing on the economy that led to this huge victory.
Right. I think a lot of people are saying that, to that question. My answer would be yes and no. That basically what's been happening is the opposition framed the whole thing as a kind of like a delivering popular verdict on the Park administration, particularly with regard to the issues of sinking of Sewol, and also Sewol Ferry, and also the appointment disasters. The thing is, in response to that, the ruling party wanted to focus on the issues of local developments by these, the areas that these representatives are supposed to be representing, and also, the overall focusing on or like spreading this message. The ruling party is very interested in introducing to the people the leaders who can represent this local interest and the local concerns of the local communities. So that was the main strategy. Of course, there was an economic component to it, and as you mentioned, the Park administration has offered all this big push and boost, determination at least for the economic boost here, and a lot of people believe that has made a certain difference here. I think the result is actually is that of the combination of all these all together. That's why the ruling party could actually win 5 out of 6 seats in the Seoul and Gyeonggi area, and also all of the 3 seats in Chungcheong area, and even 1 seat in Honam region, particularly Gwangju Jeolla region. This is the first time since 1988. So this huge victory came not just based upon the economic issue focus, but also the overall, the frame that both sides actually came to define. And certainly there was a mistake on the side of, looks like there was a mistake on the side of the opposition, not talking about economy at all, allowing actually the ruling party to make the economy as a problem issue, and then offering their own remedies.
Right. So I suppose it's a strategic win by the ruling party. But even if putting aside all these, by-election results, the stock market, for one, and of course the real estate market as well, they seem to be giving a very positive, enthusiastic feedback to Finance Minister Choi You-sun's ambitious reform drive.
Right, that's what the media is saying. And for sure in the stock market, we have seen all this interesting, very exciting rise until yesterday. Today we had some interesting roller coaster movement, but until yesterday, very exciting rise of the stocks. They're saying this had a lot to do with Choi You-sun's policy stance and expectation for more dividends coming out of stocks, which has caused a lot more of excited buying on the side of foreign buyers here. So for sure we see that, and Korean media is very much excited to report the fact that the housing market, for instance, in Seoul, the houses and apartments especially were traded this year actually. Actually, this month particularly has been doubled in comparison with what has happened the same month last year. So they're saying there are all these indications of the excitement in the real estate market as well. So we'll have to wait and see on this. It looks like I think the media is a little bit overreacting to this because just 1 month is not a great measurement we can use. And also they are talking about the industrial output rising from the previous month, rising in June from the previous month. But the thing is, previous month, May, we had fewer working days. So the media is very excited to show that there is an excitement to it. But I think we need more time. But for sure, in the stock market, I think it is a fact that the market has been showing its enthusiasm as a reaction to Choi You-sun's policy lines.
Right, and for May industrial output, I mean, it's because May output was just far too low because of fewer working days, and then especially right after the April's ferry disaster.
Exactly.
So that cannot be a very concrete standard to measure upon.
Right.
Now, of course, this should not be happening, and I would not go on to speculate this, but is there any chance that these announced policies there will be a little bit of a rollback on that part, or even Finance Minister Choi You-sun's, I suppose, cooling off his enthusiasm a little bit now that the elections are over?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I suppose there's a possibility there for sure. I think he's aware of that speculation, so he was making it very clear yesterday and today about, particularly on the real estate side, that his government or his economic policy-making team will remain very determined and committed to the cause of offering boost to the economy and so on. But the thing is, yesterday already, we thought the 41 trillion won extra money will be coming in this year, but they said it will be 26 they will be coming in this year, and the remainder next year. So what does that mean? Maybe some certain step back here or modification of their promises. I think we need to wait and see on that one. It looks like, as I said, the real estate side, I think all the actions are being taken place, but I would speculate the taxes on the corporate cash and the incentives on the dividends and as well as investment, because of the corporate community's negative reaction to the initiatives, I think there is a great chance for these initiatives to be kind of like modified and then kind of like being slowed down a little bit and
maybe
all that.
Watered down a little bit.
Yeah, in coming months. So that'll be my bet.
All right. Well, at the nation's top office, I'm sure the presidential office is more than relieved from this the by-election outcome.
Right.
In fact, I think it really cemented the 2.5 years or whatnot with the remainder of President Park's term in office.
Right.
What will we see as for President Park's move from now on? Do we see her? I'm sure she'll be putting more priority on her economic drive and regulatory reforms.
Right.
Now that she can move away from the by-elections campaigning.
Right, exactly. I think your speculation is pretty much right there, and I agree with you on that deregulation and the boosting the economy. But together with that, I think she still has to also show some results about her idea of the economic reform as a whole, 3-year plan, what that means, and creative economy and all that kind of stuff. We need more time on that. She is in a perfect position to go ahead with her initiatives because for the next year and 8 months, she does not have a major election coming up. So we will have to wait and see what kind of actions she'll be taking. It'll be quite interesting to see how the presidential office will go ahead with their policy initiatives when actually this party actually won this huge victory without talking about the last name Park for the first time in 10 years.
Right.
So interesting dynamics between the presidential office and the ruling party. So a lot of eyes will be closely watching what will be coming down the road in coming months.
Right, and Korean politics and state of affairs as well.
Right.
Well, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, that is our final episode of Business Today. I would really like to thank you for your contributions, your enthusiasm for discussion, and sharing your expertise with us every day for the last 2.5 years. Our team and I would like to show our great appreciation to you.
Thank you very much. It's been a great ride, and I hope we can do this again sometime in the future.
Definitely so. Thank you.
Thanks.
And that is our final edition of Business Today. A big thank you from our team for watching today and for the past 2.5 years. From tomorrow, August 1st, we will have regular ARIRANG News broadcast at 4 p.m. Korea time. And I'll see you at 6 p.m. Korea time today.